L. Ron Howard wanted to start a cult.
L. Ron Hubbard.
That's 100% L. Ron Howard.
It's 100% L. Ron Hubbard.
It's 100% L. Ron Howard. 100%. What you gotta do is break him down. You gotta L. Ron Howard him.
That's not a thing. So much about Scientology except the guy's name. That's the easiest part of it. What was it? Would he invent Scientology like after he directed Backdraft in Apollo 13?
No, that was Ron Howard. I'm talking about L. Ron Howard.
Oh my God.
Guys, can we please stop?
I'm sorry. I have to laugh at that every single time.
It's a great intro, Sterling.
It's how I talk with my family. It's how I talk with my brother. It's just a normal thing. Anyways, hey, happy Sunday morning to everybody. And before I get anything in the chat that says, wait, it's Monday morning, happy Monday morning to all of you way on the other side of the planet. We kind of have a little special interview today, and I want to introduce you to Christa from The Curious Cat. Did I get that right?
That Curious Cat, yep.
That Curious Cat. Let me make sure I wrote that down correctly when I did this. Oh my goodness, the pressure. That Curious Cat. Here we go. She is also streaming on her YouTube channel, and you can find her at That Curious Cat. Now, Christa reached out to me about a month ago, maybe a little longer than that, and we've just been talking back and forth. I have found that she has a very vivid and quite educated interest in Scientology. And some of the questions she asked, I thought were not only appropriate, but also very inquisitive. And so I would love for you to introduce yourself to everybody, but that is the kind of the overture of why I wanted to do an interview, or I wanted you to interview me, or you wanted to interview me. And I said, yes, that's really where it landed. But Christa, please go ahead and let everyone know who you are. And yeah, we'll go on from there.
Sounds great. Thank you for doing this with me, Sterling. I've been pretty pumped all week knowing this was coming up. So I'm ready to ask lots of questions. But hello, everybody. My name is Christa. I have a YouTube channel, That Curious Cat. I have posted some videos on there just about, hot topic things that really inspire me. And when it comes to my reaching out to you, Sterling, I've really been fascinated with anything cult related since I was a teenager. Really the psychology behind it, what drives human beings, what inspires us and motivates us to form, collective groups as a tribe with each other, and how that can manifest out into real life. And especially since the inception of SPTV and seeing everybody come forward with their own specific channels, it's been a wealth of knowledge for me specifically that I didn't fully get from just the documentaries that came out, or like A&E programs or things like that I could watch. So I have a ton of questions just built upon that and my curiosity on what drives human beings and what lands those as ex-Scientologists and what life looks like for them afterwards and what initially kept them in Scientology originally. So that's about it. Yeah.
And guys, that's wonderful. That's right in my wheelhouse. That is the approach that I find interesting when people from outside of Scientology who were never in the cult, when they look at it that way and they actually study all parts of it, and they really look into the channels. And I mean, I don't know, have you ever actually read a Scientology book or no?
Oh, I haven't read a book. Now
Okay.
I've listened to audio. I'm an audio listener.
Okay.
I have not listened to Jenna's book or what's his name? Mitch Brisker. I haven't listened to him because I know you've talked about his recently. So that is on my list to do. But my first initial documentary that I watched was on A&E, and this would have been in like 1994.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was it was a long time ago. So yeah, I was 14 then. So that I was hooked at that point. And after that, obviously going clear. And I can't remember the names of them, to be honest, Sterling. I've absorbed so much that I can't remember all the names of, there's so many.
Yeah,
So
there are
many.
really a
At
lot
this
now.
point, there's a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah.
But yeah.
There are a
So
lot.
I have listened to audiobooks.
Okay.
And I wouldn't even be able to listen to you because there's at least 6, I think,
Yeah.
in my audiobook list. So yeah. Mike
Yeah, and
Rinders obviously was the last one I finished.
Okay, and that was also excellent. A very
Yeah.
good book. All the ones I've read: Janice Gillum Grady's, Jenna Miscavige, Hill. Who obviously I have personal. I'm in that one, so that one's more personal to me, and it's obviously talking a lot about my family, my mom, my brother.
Yeah.
And very accurate, except for the football part. I always like to make that clear, just so all of my watchers know. At no point did my twin brother and I ever ask our 6-year-old tiny little sister to play football with us.
Oh, so wait, back it up. Is that Jenna's memory then?
Yes.
Oh,
It is. Yes, it is.
Isn't that fascinating?
Maybe we were playing tag or something, but there's no way. I mean, the football is half her size at that point. So there's just no way we asked her. And it's always like, Justin calls me. He's like, we did not play football with Jenna. No, we definitely did not. But it's just always a funny thing. And I know I have memories that I'm sure other people have different takes on.
Of course. Well, they do say that memories aren't reliable. So
no, they're not. No, and there's a great book on
over time.
Yep. They change with your preferences, don't they?
Absolutely. Yeah. Your perspective on the world at that time, which will shift and evolve that it goes on. Man, I have memories as a child that I literally, they aren't memories. They're stories that I was told happened to me. And I've just in my mind fabricated them into, you know, like reality. Yeah, it happens with memory.
It's a fascinating subject. It's why memory and eyewitnesses in criminal trials aren't always reliable anymore. And again, I always bring it up. I'll bring it up again. If you want a book on that subject, this is absolutely the best book. Leonard Moldenov, Subliminal: How Your Unconscious Mind Rules Your Behavior.
Okay.
It covers all of that in detail.
Oh, I'm curious to read that one.
Oh, it's so good. It's one of my favorite books of all time. It's so good.
Okay.
But hey, I'm just distracting you now. Let's get this.
No, that's all right. That's all right. Well, you know, I think before we get into the heavy stuff, I've got some basic questions that I'm curious on. You know, with Christmas 8 days away.
Oh, yes, it is.
I know it came up fast, didn't it?
Yes,
I'm curious, in the Scientology world, do they celebrate Christmas?
They absolutely do.
They put Christmas trees up. They exchange gifts.
Yep. Even in the Sea organization, they did Kris Kringle. They had Christmas tree up. I used to actually, as the trees I see, I used to go around and decorate with my team all of the trees on the property. We wrapped all the palm trees up the base of the palm trees. We would decorate the trees in specific locations where the crew would go. You know, I love Christmas, but you know, what's funny is, all the way up until I was 19, I had no clue Christmas was related to Jesus Christ.
Oh, okay. So they didn't explain that at all.
No, because you didn't study about anything else. Now, mind you, of course, there's some people that probably knew that. I'm just saying I particularly did not even associate the two. We've celebrated Christmas since day one. One of my favorite things was my dad would take us to see my Aunt Penny, Aunt Prue in Palm Springs once a year. But we definitely celebrated it. It wasn't until much later on that the question came up, why are we celebrating Christmas? Besides it being a wonderful holiday, and it really is a wonderful holiday.
And what was the answer?
It was that we celebrate. Well, it's kind of goes along the line that Scientology sets out, that any religion is, you know, okay with Scientology. You could be of any faith or denomination and still practice Scientology, which is not true, but maybe they just hold on to Christmas because that makes it look like that, right?
So when you asked that question, or at least for any practicing Scientologists that put up a Christmas tree that might have been in your boat, perhaps second generation Scientologists that weren't out of Scientology originally and then went in, and have no understanding of Christianity and the basis of Christmas, how would that have been explained? Like, what would have been the basis for, hey, it's time to put a Christmas tree up, or we're going to exchange gifts? Like, what was the basis of that?
Well, you know, I don't think there was an explanation. But really because okay, so we're Scientology's created in the 50s in the United States of America, which is a predominantly Christian nation. We all had, you know, a majority of the people that were Scientologists had a ton of family members who weren't Scientologists. And if you join Scientology, you all of a sudden can't stop showing up to your family Christmas parties. So it's something that I don't think they could shed. They had to kind of keep in place.
Right. That makes sense.
Because it's predominantly that way with everyone's family. So I never asked for an explanation, nor did I want that question to be answered, because I loved Christmas and I kept wanting to get gifts. So I wasn't going to question the premise behind.
Of course, especially as a kid, you definitely want the gifts.
But I never really associated it either, because even as a kid, I still, you know, I didn't read Scientology books as a kid. As a kid, I got auditing, right? And even that, it wasn't abundantly clear to me what I was doing. It was just that the person that was doing it with me was either a family member or someone that was really close to me, both ladies, and they were very nice and polite. And so I went along with it. And it never occurred to me to be anything sort of out of the ordinary. And the same with contact assist and whatever little things we learned as kids as Scientologists. So it never occurred to me to ask the question. It was just, hey, that's what my parents were doing.
So people pretty close to you primarily did the auditing then.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you think that that might have steered perhaps your experiences with auditing? Because obviously on SPTV, we hear a lot of back and forths and some have pretty negative experiences. Do you think that you were on the lucky side of that scale?
Yes. And I do. But to be clear, so when I was a child, when I was much younger, before I had actually joined the C organization, getting that basic Scientology auditing wasn't an enforced thing. It wasn't something I had to do. Once you hit the C organization and you're still a child or a teenager and you're now getting auditing, you're getting forced auditing, things you're not asking for, things you're not deciding to get. And then when there's an ethics investigation or interrogation, that's a whole nother thing. And that, no matter how you do it, whether you're a child, adult, senior citizen, an interrogation in Scientology is abusive by nature. It is brutal. It's hard to go through. It's hard to understand. And there's trauma connected to it every time. No question.
Well, that intrigues me, actually, you saying that, because as somebody outside the box, outside Scientology, obviously, when the only thing I know about the auditing process is what I've heard or absorbed just from various different videos. Is there a difference then in the type of auditing? Like, this is what I imagine outside the box. There's like a predetermined list of questions that an auditor has to go through, whether that's just a basic auditor or an ethics auditor. I don't know if they're different, if you want to explain those a little bit. Is it always the same standard questions that they go through? Like, do they sit and they're like, number one, and check? And like, do they go through the list and then it just gets more intense or severe as it goes? Or do they vary?
It varies. Again, I'm not an expert at this, so I apologize if someone disagrees with me. I'm okay with that. And I also see this a little different than some of the other creators, and that's just my personal experience, and it's also my brother's personal experience, and a few people that I know. But you do have your rudiments, which are the things it's considered, you call flying the rudiments when you start, and that's to get at so that you can get to the L. Ron Hubbard processes. You remove any barriers that may be there, such as an upset or an action you committed that you're hiding. And those are removed in the beginning. So they do ask the questions at the beginning, has a withhold been missed? That by nature can get into a semi-interrogation because they would be fishing. If that read on the meter, they'll be fishing for what overt you may have had, whether it was stealing erasers from your teacher's desk at school or taking candy from the general store, or whatever it may be. Again, and this is my view on this. I do not think, I think when Scientology was created, in my opinion, L. Ron Hubbard didn't really take into consideration children. And by that nature alone, a majority of his technology and policies are actually quite abusive to children because they do not take into account that the person is a child. Then
they're adults in small bodies.
Right. That just went along with later on when Scientology became a whole track and past life religion cult, that then he justify whatever else by explaining, well, just so you know, that kid was an adult last life, which is absurd, of course, which is absolutely absurd. So I think a lot of what child abuse in Scientology is just created by the fact that he didn't even consider it a thing. And then he maybe justified it with that statement later on. I don't think it intended to be abusive because as my mom said too, when you're 14, 15 years old and all of a sudden you're told you can be an adult. Well, as a kid, you're kind of like, oh, hell yeah.
You're going to love that.
Being treated like a kid.
I mean, let's face it. When you're 13, 14, you kind of feel smarter than your parents anyways.
Yeah, exactly.
So, it works. It fits.
Yeah, I never did, unfortunately, because that's not fair. My dad and mom are pretty smart. But
look at you.
And that doesn't justify it. That doesn't justify it in any means. That just is what it is. And of course, it ends up being a manipulation. And it's a manipulation by whoever chooses to use it as such. So if you have a sleazy recruiter, which there are a lot of in the C organization in Scientology, they're going to use every angle they can to get a child, including the statement that you're going to be on your own. You don't need your parents. You're going to get paid on your own. You're going to live with the people that you're same age. Of course, who doesn't want to get out of their house at 14 and 15 and start experiencing the world?
it's pulling the kids away from the parents as well to a certain extent. There's a separation piece there, so it removes that distraction from the parents to be able to, work the cause or whatever, task they want to put the parents to. It removes that distraction because they're segregating the kids.
Yes.
No, it does fascinate me because if for current standing Scientologists, how could they at this point, after 80 years, 70 years of Scientology being active, if there is any truth to that, wouldn't those children look at their mom at 5 and be like, I've already done this?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that hasn't happened yet. Nope. So how do they explain that in Scientology?
Well, actually, okay. So another thing that I've had, that I have a differing opinion than some other creators is the idea of child auditors. It absolutely was an occurrence. It absolutely happened. I believe even David Miscavige himself was a child auditor, which in that particular case was abuse to the adult he was auditing. Because apparently there was an instance where he either attacked or yelled at one of his.
Really?
Yeah. No, that guy's a piece of work. And I delved a little bit into it with Dylan Gill about how a person like that who comes into power gets to be so evil. Yeah. But let's not go on that track yet.
We'll get there soon.
Yeah. So I did not know many child auditors in Scientology. That does not mean there wasn't a lot. I do think some of the rhetoric tends to blow it out of the water, because in my 20 or so years working for Scientology, in my 27 years being in Scientology, I maybe came across 2 to 3 child auditors. And by child auditors, they were 14, 15, and 16 years old.
Right. Yep.
So that is a child, but also teenager. So
yeah.
I think there's a nuance with those words that need to be described. I think as a 14, 15, 16-year-old, you have a little bit more self-control and understanding of life than you do if you're 8.
Yeah,
actually,
I agree with that. Yeah,
a
absolutely.
lot more. But there was an auditor, an actual famous one at the Golden Era Productions base. She was in RTC. She was one of Marty Rathbun's little flying monkeys, to quote Mitch Brisker. And he talks about her in his book, and her name was Laura.
Okay.
No relation to Laura FM. Not Laura FM, but her name was Laura. And I remember so she started training as an auditor at something like the age of 10. By the time she was 14, 15, she was interrogating adults at the Golden Era Production, like the highest executives. And once or twice, someone had just in a little whisper mentioned that she had been reincarnated. That's how she was able to be so good at what she does at such a young age. Because to be able to interrogate other adults and to get through training to that level at such a young age, you have to be able to study a lot.
Well, outside the box again, devil's advocate. I mean, she might have just been blessed with an increased IQ and just a fabulous intelligence, and it was a total fluke.
And a great learning ability and duplication and high on the aptitude chart, all those things. Agreed. But that was the only time where I actually thought or heard that's possible. Yeah. Starting
at 10, that's young. When we talk, we've heard a lot of, the people that follow SPTV have heard a lot about the abuses that really, were born from the auditing process because of those questions. Some of them are inappropriate for children. And I guess it wouldn't matter which side of the table you were on. If you were a child being audited, or if you were the child auditor auditing an adult, because they're still verbalizing those or articulating those potentially inappropriate things to somebody that's young.
Yeah, that is true. And again, remember those a lot of the instances where people are talking about are specific to them.
Right.
I got a lot of auditing as a child. There was never one point where I was asked a sexual question, where I was asked an inappropriate question, because the person on the other side of the table either knew very close to my family or was my family member. My Aunt Griffey actually audited me when I was younger, and she was a lovely, lovely person. And it was just like talk therapy at that particular point. There was a few actions where you do body control stuff where they make you touch a wall and go back and forth. And I kind of completely lost my shit on one of those. But even when I did, the whole thing was to get me back calmly. And again, I'm not defending Scientology. I'm just calling it how I saw it and how it is. Scientology is abusive by nature. It is a cult for sure. I actually think really do think, and I've heard the term that Scientology, you know, is sexually trafficking children. I just don't believe that, because I don't believe L. Ron Hubbard created that for any reason. I think children are a hindrance to Scientology, got in the way, and they were just trying to figure out what to do with them. And then abusive people who came into power then abused children.
Right.
Then didn't report to authorities when abuse happened.
Yeah.
That's the worst crime Scientology has.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we did talk about this briefly before, and it's one of those things with any form of, you know, modern change or new concept that comes to be, if we want to consider Scientology a concept. At the inception, when somebody creates those things, they're not considering, okay, I'm going to, you know, 1 through 10, these are the rules and the guidelines that we're going to follow. They're not really considering how 1 through 10 will eventually translate in the future and what that would impact. So I don't particularly think that L. Ron Hubbard foresaw the potential abuses that could happen to children with this layer of protection that Scientology has in place, just based on their basic fundamentals of operation. You know, you don't report any Scientologists to the police. Children are adults in small bodies. Just that itself is can fester, you know, that type of abuse. And I'm not necessarily sure. I don't know. This is speculative here, complete conjecture. I would hope L. Ron Hubbard didn't know. Let's just leave it with that. I would hope he didn't know that it would manifest itself in that way.
Yeah. I think he was obsessed with money. I mean, he wanted to make money, no question. He wanted notoriety. He wanted fame. And you know, the part of the problem too, as you know, is his policies cannot change.
Right.
So if he said something back then and didn't, you know, like, of course it's absurd to think if a child was abused by someone at that cult, you can't report it to the police. That's ridiculous. Yeah. It's insane. Well,
is there, you know, I did catch Aaron Smith-Levin from Growing Up in Scientology. I did catch his video talking about the recent judge ruling for one of the Jane Does, which fascinated me because I didn't know this. This was news to me, that the whole topic of arbitration that sits within Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard actually didn't create that. That was something that came later to be able to you know, sideswipe some of the court cases that were coming their way, I guess. Yeah. So the hypocrisy in that, do all Scientologists know that whole form of arbitration came after the fact, in which case new policies can happen, or if things can be changed? Why don't they ask or question that?
They don't, because as Aaron pointed out, it's actually not an arbitration. They're just picking a specific action, which is a committee of evidence, and they're saying that is arbitration. There really is no arbitration. Oh,
so it's really just to silence the court and just say, kick it back to us and we'll take care of it. And then
you got it. But they shot themselves in the foot, because now if Discovery asks for your arbitration policy, they don't have one, because you cannot read the committee of evidence policy and ever think that that's arbitration, because it's not.
Right.
The committee of evidence is only enacted when you're already guilty. It's just there to find out how guilty you are.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. Well, it's going to be any form of internal review within Scientology is going to be 100% biased. You know, it's going to get closed down regardless. So I think that's really positive news for, you know, a judge to rule in the favor of keeping it within the court system and approving what's Discovery? Sorry, I had a bit of a brain fart there. Yeah. In terms of those policies, the fact that you have these preset established policies that L. Ron Hubbard, and I understand there's thousands and thousands of these policies, they're very structured. You know, I think there's even one that tells you how to wash your windows, isn't there?
Yes. Yeah, there is.
So, you know, just like with any cult, in inverted commas, any high controlled group or extremist group, there is a preset set of rules in place. You know, you lean on those for what to do, and it will naturally start to inhibit or decrease your critical thinking. Do you find that has happened with most Scientologists? Do they not even think outside of the sphere of what they're doing when they get up? I mean, what time did you guys get up at the Sea Org?
Yeah,
early hours, right? Like
it depends. Yeah, we would usually catch a bus by 8 o'clock, be at work at 8:30, and then 8:30 to 9 we had breakfast and start work at 9. I mean, it did depend. Do I think that they do have that? Yeah. The only specific example I can give you is a perfect one with my dad. after 2004, when Tom Cruise was jumping all over the couches and doing his
Right.
whole thing and really made himself look like an idiot in the public.
Yeah,
I remember
a little
talking
bit.
to my dad at the time, and he was like, it was in 2006 or 2007. I was talking to my dad, and he was like, "Oh yeah, Tom Cruise is amazing. He's doing such a good job for Scientology." And my stepmom was there, who did have a little bit more critical thinking skills than my dad. And I was like, "Yeah, you know, I get what you're saying, Dad, but you realize he made himself look like an idiot, and calling out a pregnant woman was stupid. And like, I don't get, you don't see that. No, Tom Cruise doing great." And my stepmom turns to me, Barbara, and goes, "You're right, Sterling. He did make everyone look like a bit of an idiot." So there's a perfect example.
Right.
It's so obvious. No one could argue that what Tom Cruise was doing over those years, 2004, 2006, was just stupid, horrible public relations, bad behavior. But my dad couldn't see it at all, because in the C organization, it was so, Tom Cruise is our savior. He's the man. He won that big medal, et cetera, et cetera. And so, no, yeah, they absolutely can not see the hand that's like, 2 inches in front of their nose.
Well, on that, following that, with the inception of the internet, I find, I don't know definitively, Sterling, but I'd be interested to look back and to see when the internet really took off, if the number of ex-Scientologists drastically increased after, the information sharing system that is the internet came to be. So I do wonder if prior to that, if it was easier to keep things like under wraps at Scientology.
It was. That would be an interesting data point, by the way. If
Yeah,
someone
I'd be
would actually do
curious.
that.
Yeah, I really would be curious. So with respect to the internet, do you not have access to the internet at the Sea Org?
You do not.
Do they keep, okay, you don't have a computer at all? Like just no internet?
No, you have internet, but
Okay.
you're only able to use internet inside the facilities. And when you have the internet in the facilities, but let me be clear, Scientology, they have a life outside. They go home.
Right.
They can look at whatever they want.
Right.
Of
So
course,
what is it that prevents them? What is it that stops them from looking?
They know that if they do look, it's a thought that's going to occur in their head. And then when they go back in for Scientology auditing or processing, that may come up in what I described as the rudiments, where they're asked, have we missed anything that you've done? Have you done anything wrong? Once you start doing that, you're just throwing money away, because you're now taking more time talking about the things you shouldn't have looked at than spending money on actually moving up the bridge. And then you have the ethics that follows from that, the shaming, whatever else it may be. So it's actually quite a threat to look at something anti-Scientology if you're a Scientologist.
So it's self-protection to a certain extent, plus the, this is what we did talk about this before when we chatted. I know, I didn't know L. Ron Hubbard. I don't know anything about him, but what he, when it comes to Scientology, what the inception of Scientology isn't necessarily that unique. There are a lot of different cult organizations that have implemented similar systems, if you will, that really can navigate or steer how somebody operates within that system to protect them from looking at the internet or breaking the rules kind of thing. And that's what I find so fascinating is, are you familiar with NXIVM? Did you watch anything about NXIVM?
Oh, I watched a documentary on NXIVM. Yeah, that was fantastic.
Fascinating. The correlations between Keith Raniere or NXIVM and what they put in place, and some, like, there was a lot that was ripped off from Scientology. Like there really was, how to keep people in line. And it just fascinates me with L. Ron Hubbard. Like, was he a psychopath that just wanted to make money and didn't care about the feelings of others, or a sociopath, whatever you want to call him? Or was where do you land on that? What do you think? It's
an interesting debate that happens between many people. Now, I tend to think that the only people that can really comment on that are those that knew him personally. And I'm fortunate enough to have people like Janice Gillum Grady, my mom, Mike Rinder, people that I grew up with that actually spent time with L. Ron Hubbard. And, it's such my opinion, and this can only be my opinion, can only be conjecture.
Yeah.
And I grew up, I knew his son. I actually knew L. Ron Hubbard's son pretty well. I used to work for him in his art studio when I was just a little kid. And by the way, guys, work for him in his art studio meant I would read comic books during the day whenever he needed something from the canteen. I would run down, pick it up, go back up, and then just sit around the rest of the day reading comic books. So it wasn't child labor. But when I think about L. Ron Hubbard and everything that was created and the amount of time he spent writing all these insanely detailed little items, I go, there's a person that truly believed what he was doing. He wanted the money. He needed the money, but he truly believed in what he was doing. But because I think he was partly crazy. And the only reason I can get that is because a lot of Scientology, the lower levels are kind of common sense, and most are borrowed from other religions, other Eastern religions. But then once you get to the OT levels, you cannot argue that that was the same person that wrote those.
Yeah.
You can't. There's no way. I mean, he didn't even do the research enough to figure out that the volcanoes he mentions in OT3 weren't around 65 million years ago. So, but then he also detailed out so many other things in such finite detail that you go, what is happening? Why would you spend that much time doing that? If you're already going to con us at the end, why spend all the time in the beginning? Right? Why?
Well, this is where it baffles me, Sterling. And this is what I'd love to know. Like, any form of coercive control that's in place, or the basic psychology that we now understand from psychologists that will really, like, love bombing, for example. Yeah. There would be nobody in Scientology if Scientology didn't have any benefits in the beginning. Right. So people really do feel, I've heard from various different ex-Scientologists that when they do auditing, they walk away. It can be addictive even. They walk away and they feel really good about themselves. And which I imagine is the same thing that a lot of people feel when they leave church sometimes. Like, wow, I'm a really moral person today. I'm going to, pull my socks up and do better. So in the beginning, I think that makes sense why that had to be that way. Right. So by the time you get to the OT levels, by the time you're clear and you get to the bridge, you've already invested so much money. You're not going to want to walk away from that. You don't want to, be labeled an idiot that you just blew this money. I mean, think of how many people in life invest money in a bad business idea and it turns sour and they're afraid to tell people out of just that embarrassment. So it's kind of that same concept. And then you've got the knowledge reports that keep people in place. It's a tattletale system, which is fascinating to me. I can't get away from the fact that I feel like L. Ron Hubbard was either a genius at understanding basic human psychology of what is going to keep somebody here and not let them leave, or if he was evil, or if he was mentally ill, or if it was just a total fluke and it worked out this way and he couldn't have foreseen how it would end up. I don't know where I land on that.
I don't think we ever, I think we can only assume any of those, but I think it's a mix of all of them. People that worked with L. Ron Hubbard and worked with David Miscavige said that L. Ron Hubbard was far better than David Miscavige. L. Ron Hubbard could have a temper, but he wasn't like that all the time. He wasn't insanely vicious. Now, was he childlike in his vengeances? Yeah. I mean, L. Ron Hubbard's whole attack on psychiatry and psychology is just because they shunned him when he wrote Dianetics. He was butthurt, and he carried that vendetta out for 50 years for no particularly good reason. Right. So he was very imperfect from the start. Right. He's not above all that. Of course, he's still very, very human. But do I think he knew how to manipulate people? Yes. Yeah. And I think that's where the money came in. He knew if he could keep people in, he could keep the money coming. Did he even believe that some of his stuff worked? I do believe he actually did believe some of his stuff worked. Right. Maybe he got caught between a rock and a hard place and eventually had to just keep writing because he knew he had promised this top part. He talked about it so much that he now needed to create it and maybe even believed that what he created was the truth because he'd been talking about it for so long. People can convince themselves that what they're saying is true by talking about it enough.
Well, for sure. Yeah. Eventually you start to believe your own BS, really. I actually have a question about, I do wonder about the whole L. Ron Hubbard's vendetta against therapists. There have been people that have said, and when I've watched any videos talking about the auditing process, although I haven't seen the predetermined set of questions that are asked. So I'm only just trying to visualize based on what people are saying. Right. It does sound a little bit like therapy to me. You're going in, you're kind of clearing anything off your chest. You're talking it through, you're able to purge it. Or religion, you go Catholic church, you go to a priest and you confess and you get it off your chest and you say it and you walk out and you feel a little bit lighter. I wonder if a part of L. Ron Hubbard's dislike for the therapy world was because they were directly competing with him.
I would say, yeah. I would say, yeah, because it is. The beginning of Scientology is talk therapy. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
It's more regimented,
Right.
for sure. And it does, unfortunately, emphasize a lot of sexual and things that you would not want to normally discuss. It makes those come to the forefront. But the beginning parts are very much like talk therapy.
Did those questions evolve, Sterling? Like the talk therapy questions, like what the sexual aspect of it? I've heard various different commentators on SPTV talk about the increase in the sexual connotation of those questions happening after David Miscavige, that he was obsessed with who was having sex with who and who was doing what. Did they change and evolve with the change in leadership, or were they always...
So there was something set in stone. I mean, a lot of people have talked about the Johannesburg security check interrogation. I never had that, but it is a very brutal set of questions.
Right.
And that was written by L. Ron Hubbard. Now, I think people that followed, like David Miscavige, took that as a yardstick for what they could and couldn't do. A lot of the times moving forward, when you'd be interrogated, it no longer was a standard form interrogation. It was set questions that Dave or Marty Rathbun had instructed people to ask you. And if it was Dave or Marty Rathbun, in most cases, there was going to be a sexual nature to it because they were obsessed with that.
Oh, really? So Marty as well as Dave?
Yeah. Oh, yes. And if you, there's a great example of how Marty did that in a session in Mitch's book, where he describes exactly what happened there. And I got interrogated and had Marty standing in the room once too, blocking the door on the way out. And that was not an enjoyable experience whatsoever. That was the only time I had someone blocking me from getting out of the room. In most cases, you can get up and walk out of the room. So if you choose to do so, but there's ramifications for that, of course.
How did you handle that?
I just had to sit there and answer the questions for as long as I could.
Right. Oh, so you were prohibited from leaving.
Yeah. When Marty was standing at the door, I was prohibited from leaving. Yes.
Yeah, he's a big menacing fella.
Yeah.
You know, I have a question when it comes to because obviously they're watching the Aftermath show, watching various SPTV commentators. There are a number of people that experienced child abuse in Scientology. And this was new to me. So, you know, like I said, starting watching Scientology documentaries and shows since I was 14, there was no mention of child abuse. It wasn't until I saw the Aftermath and saw a few young girls that were, well, not young anymore, but women that were referring to when they were young and how these things happened. And I was floored to know that that happened within Scientology. However, and I don't want this to come across as uncaring, I wasn't shocked now that I understand the fundamentals of how Scientology works. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. And we kind of touched on this when we chatted before.
Yeah.
But Scientology has a protective layer in place with the whole concept of children aren't children, they're adults in small bodies. Mm-hmm. Plus the whole, we are not going to report Scientologists to the police. In history, at least in the past 30 years, 40 years, it's not a shock to me to see on the news that some guy has been arrested for abusing children, and he's a coach. He's the head of an orphanage. You know what I'm saying? Anything that has direct access or exposure to children, that's the scary thing about that type of predator. I mean, they can look like the guy next door or a girl next door. I don't want to discriminate between sexes, but statistically speaking, they do tend to be men. They're hard to recognize up front. So you won't find it until things get real and somebody, you know, blows the whistle on it. There is this natural protective layer when it comes to Scientology. Do you think that because of the inception of the internet and this, you know, cascading of new information on how Scientology works, do you think that they're actually potentially luring more predators to Scientology? Or do you think it would have festered? Because based on the documentaries I watch on child abuse and specifically, they all communicate in kind of like a network. Like, do you think that would have passed through and that that might be why it's more festering? Let
me answer your first question, which was, I was actually shocked myself when watching the Aftermath show to see all those instances. I mean, one of the young ladies on there, and I can't remember her name, I worked with her mom at Golden Era Productions.
Oh, right.
Carrie was the mom's name. And it was shocking to me to see that there were so many of those situations. Now, one of the things in Scientology, besides not reporting it to officials, they also compartmentalize the information.
Right.
They want the least amount of people knowing about things that happen there.
Right.
So if you were not in ethics lines or HCO, which is their equivalent to their human resources department, but HCO handled communications, ethics, investigations. That's also where security lands in that particular department. You would not know about it. So because I didn't spend a lot of time in that department, I very rarely heard about it. How much I heard about it after, I was truly surprised how much of it actually went on, even when I was at Golden Era Productions, that I never even heard about.
Right.
There would be
well,
people,
and you were even a child there.
Yeah.
So you didn't even hear about that within the circles of the other children.
No,
right.
No. Not even. I mean, there was one instance when I was at the ranch of another child going through the rooms late at night, and this was really unfortunate and inappropriately touching little girls.
Another child was doing
another
that.
child. And I heard about that one because I was there when that happened, or I had just left when that happened. But after that, I was really a kid with a bunch of adults.
Mm-hmm.
And I did know of one or two instances where there was inappropriate behavior between an adult and a child, but maybe one or two the whole time I was there.
Right.
But that does not mean that's all that happened, because again, they compartmentalize. So one of the reasons why Scientology doesn't report it isn't just because it's don't report a fellow Scientologist. It's because it would make them look bad. They really truly believe they are elite. They are better than Catholicism. They're better than Judaism. They're better than Islam. They're better than everybody. So if they had that happening in their church, in their cult, then they're just like everyone else. That's not possibly the case. That's really more where that comes from.
Right.
And then, like you say, I do believe that if you see as a SA inclined person with children, and you see that, you may go work at a Scientology school, at a Sea organization base, or something along that lines. I think Aaron's even done a video about a guy that goes around fixing computers, who's a self-admitted, and they
he stays at the houses of families with small children.
Yeah. Now that's a whole nother level. That's not just not reporting. That's for whatever reason they need to hold on to that guy. They're letting it happen, which is just blows my mind.
Then there's a level of complicity that I think upsets me the most, and we'll get to complicity. But you were talking about the whole concept of Scientologists thinking that they're the elite, that they are, so they will cling on to, they'll give themselves a license to lie sometimes. To skirt the truth in the court system or with authorities, because they believe that they're fighting the good fight and their fight is bigger than anybody else's fight. And this is where it gets interesting to me after watching so many cult things, is that really isn't unique. Even with religion, Catholicism or Buddhism, any religion. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about Buddhism. I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I'm a Christian. There's a lot of sanctimonious sinners. They go to church and they measure their self-importance based on how much they follow the doctrine of Jesus or whatever the case may be. And I imagine that it's similar with Scientologists, that they separate themselves, that level of elitism that they feel, Tom Cruise said it in that video, only a Scientologist knows. We are the only ones that can help.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, the paramedics, they call me crazy, Sterling, but the paramedics could probably help at a car accident. So that whole psychology fascinates me. I'm not saying one is right or wrong or the other. It just, what is it about human beings that makes us want to embrace that we might be better than the rest?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, but it's not uncommon even in religion, right? It's really not uncommon. Some people believe they're the chosen people of God.
Yes.
Islam believes they're they have the last and final prophet from God, all of which is fine. That's your choice. What differs Scientology is that, and that doesn't mean, in Catholicism, obviously they hindered the justice that was to be done for the cases of the children being abused. They did their own thing. But in Scientology, it's like they so look down their nose at the justice system, at police, at the government, at anyone in general. You just don't even know. And it's such a weird mindset to be in, to think about. You don't even know. I mean, even as I wasn't immune to that. I remember going to visit my family in Palm Springs for Christmas, just sitting there with a smug look on my face going, they don't really know. And I kind of do. Kind of makes me a little cooler. Fortunately, I got rid of that pretty quickly. But it is absolutely a thing that I think doesn't justify, but in their own mind justifies a lot of the actions they do, which most people in the real world find egregious and horrible. Is that we don't need you to get involved in our business. We're going to handle this, because really, hey, if this guy is sexually or SAing someone, they believe that the prison system and the justice system cannot fix that. Only Scientology can. But I don't think they have a record of ever fixing that. So it's amusing that they still think that's the case. Yeah. But don't forget, then comes in the OSA arm, the investigations arm, the arm of Scientology, which is really insidious. Yeah. And they do all their stuff just to protect Scientology.
Yeah. Well, the whole fair gaming thing, that they justify fair gaming based on them clinging on to this. We have to protect Scientology. I mean, I hope that's why they're doing it, because how could anybody justify some of the things that they've done to people in fair game? Yeah. Like, it's out of control. If at least if those people at OSA think, I have to protect Scientology, at least I can sleep at night thinking, well, they're misguided. Yeah. They're misguided. They're not bad people. They're misguided. Otherwise, it's really hard as somebody outside the box to sit, and that's just not palatable to me. Right. You know what I mean? Some of the things that they do just seems batshit crazy. Sorry, excuse my French, but it seems batshit crazy what they're willing to do to other people to protect Scientology. But yet we see it all the time in all kinds of groups. We see it right now in Israel and Palestine. Yeah. Yep. Right. Like, I mean, I don't think that particular aspect of it is unique to Scientology, but it's equally as terrifying and unfortunate. And there's going to be collateral damage from, that's what's terrifying. I have a question about same behavior, different setting. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just, absolutely. At what point do you think that somebody can, in talking about the initially victim coming out as perpetrator, at what point do you think is that possible to happen? Could somebody be a victim of Scientology and then eventually adopt their policies and institute their policies so diligently that they then become a perpetrator themselves? And where do you think the culpability falls for some of the high profile people like Tom Cruise? Because I can't imagine he doesn't know at this point, or hasn't been asked in an interview, although he tries to curb that as much as he can. There's no way that he is oblivious to some of the things that have gone on in Scientology. How can he then turn a blind eye to that? Does that not make him also culpable, just as culpable as David Miscavige? Where are you on? Sorry, that's two questions in one, but where do you lie on that? Well, it's interesting because I've had that, I do have the luck of knowing quite a few ex-Sea Org members that rose pretty high up in the levels, and having grown up and been around them to get a little inside view into that sort of behavior. And I was even discussing this with my mom the other day, I still think in the Sea organization specifically, to raise to a certain level, to get to a certain position, managerial or high up, you have to run over a few people to get there. Right. And you have to do a few things that could be questionable. Now, it does break down though, because you do have distinct arms of that. And I'll give you an example. Amy Scobie, Janice Grady, my mom Biddy, they were on the managerial side. They were on the build it and try to help it grow side. Right. They were all in high positions. They all did stuff they regret. No questionable. Right. No question about that. Like even my mom, who's admitted herself, she could be very, very tough. And I know Amy could be, Janice could be, but there's that side of it. There's that end of the spectrum, that side of it. So, you do have to be able to run people over to get that and to get to that place. You have the OSA investigations RTC side.
So if you move up a gradient scale on both of those, the higher you get, the more you have to be willing to ignore or let go, or the more inherently evil your soul is to some degree. I think not as much on the managerial side. On that side, when you get your Greg Wilhairs, your Mike Rinders, and I'm not trying to throw Mike Rinder under the bus anymore, guys. You know, he's done a lot since he got out here, but he was in a position where he did a lot of damage to a lot of people. And I believe he's acknowledged that, and it's just a fact. But he is on that side, so I have to give that as an example. Mike Rinder, Marty Rathbun, Mike Sutter, Warren McShane. These are evil people that not even aren't being told by David Miscavige to do everything they do. They act on their own cognizance and go, I need to do this. I have to destroy that person. I'm going to do this because that's what they think they must do. But you have to understand in their head, I don't even know that they realize they're absolutely obliterating someone's life.
Yeah.
But can you imagine what your mindset has to be to even get into that position?
No, that's what's I can't. I absolutely can't. And in my mind, it does break it down between a person, you know, the whole nature versus nurture thing. Like some people are just inherently jerks. Yeah. And have that capability within their core makeup. And if you have something like Scientology that blankets you with a broad, almost license to behave a certain way, like protect Scientology. Yeah, that's pretty broad. You know, you can interpret that and manifest that however you'd like. And I think people like Marty Rathbun and some of the bad uns that you just listed, I think they probably leaned on that a lot, as though this is my core, you know, protective goal here. And whatever falls underneath that, I'm going to do. And I've been given permission from the chairman of the board to do that. But really, I think it might be deep in their core, a desire to want to, or they get off on it somehow. Because I can't compute it. Like, I'm curious to the people watching right now, if there's anybody that has a deep understanding of this, because to me, you know, it's like watching a true crime documentary. I can't understand how another person could hurt somebody else physically, or you know, I don't want to say it on YouTube, but KILL somebody. I can't understand how somebody else could do that. So to me, I feel like there has to be something wrong in there. There has to be something wrong. I mean, unless it's self-defense and you're protecting your children, or, you know, there's
it may start as that. It may start as something as simple as that, but then you have to be willing to go that. You know, a perfect example, considering you're Canadian. If you're putting together a hockey team, you know, you're going to have that one guy that's the enforcer, the guy that you know is willing to inflict pain on the other team. He can't skate that well. He can't shoot or handle a puck. But
Toronto Maple Leafs, Domi, he did. That was his job. He was even little, and that's all he did was just.
And that's that. And they do put together a team. They're like, there's no mistake that the Martys, the Mike Rinders, and those guys ended up, and you know, Warren McShane's and Greg Wilhairs ended up on that side. There's no mistake about that. Dave or whoever else thought, okay, that person can go there. Yeah. You know, and on the other side, it was like, and again, you know what is interesting, and I didn't know this until my mom Biddy mentioned it. Dave Miscavige, well, I now know that from being with him, is an unbelievably horrible manager. He didn't even know about that side of it. He was all legal and enforcement, and that's what happens when you get a legal and enforcement guy there. Yeah. There's a lot of conjecture between us ex-Scientology SEERG members about would it have been different if we had had a Guillaume Leserve running Scientology. And even though Scientology is a farce, and in the end it is a con, it could have kept going because there were parts of it that were good.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions to you, Sterling. Yeah. Do you think Scientology is salvageable? And if so, what does that look like?
No, I do not think it's salvageable at this particular point. It's done too much damage. And why I think it's unsalvageable is because you cannot. Now, I get Dave can and has, but essentially the idea is you cannot change LRH policy that was written in the 50s, and it cannot progress forward. And now that people really know what's in the upper Scientology levels, and that you're auditing multiple souls attached to your body as you move forward, what are you gonna do with that? I mean, like, if you go back to communication training and you know, I think that's the only thing I could even say from Scientology that may be beneficial was practicing communication in a set room where you could just do it over and over again and get good at those sort of things. who knows if I would have ended up being a good speaker or not because of that. But no, I don't. I don't think it has enough to offer.
Right.
You know, it could be a social group.
Well,
But I think, and even then it's inept. I mean, have you heard Reese and Aaron do the Desperate Housewives of Scientology?
I have, yeah.
It's pretty bad.
Wild.
Yeah.
It's
So
wild.
no, I don't think so. I just, it doesn't have enough to offer the world, and it's far too expensive. And one of the things that I don't understand how Scientologists don't see, because it took me very short amount of time to figure this out. You guys think you're going to clear the planet. You guys are really in it to make it. The way Scientology is price pointed right now,
Yeah.
not even a percentage of the population could afford to do Scientology.
Right.
The entire, like, you just can't. It has to be free. If you're really trying to do it, you have to do it for free.
Well,
Sorry.
and you know, the argument could be said that any religion is free. You know, it's wild that they even received the religious protection and tax exemption, because they're charging. It's like going to a college, going to a university. You're getting these courses and you're paying top dollar for it. So the argument could be said with that. But I just wonder if that hadn't have been in place, the pricing system, if they didn't charge, if it would survive, or even if it would have been, you know, created. Because like you said, L. Ron Hubbard, really, his driver probably was the monetization of it.
Yeah, it was. And I even heard that from his own son.
Right.
Yeah. Like he told me stories about his father and money. And he was just strange with money. Like he was really, like, he wanted every bit back. A little cheap, actually, arguably cheap. Hey, and let's be honest, L. Ron Hubbard was cheap compared to David Miscavige. L. Ron Hubbard did not fly around in private jets, did not own 4 or 5 cars, did not have 3 or 4 motorcycles, and did not hobnob with celebrities.
Well, I have a question about that, actually, because this fascinates me. You know, in all of the stories, the Aftermath Foundation, watching a lot of these families get broken apart through disconnection, which is just brutal. I've got to say, brutal.
One of the worst things they do.
It really is. Just for that alone. And I mean, the abuse within Scientology is big enough in and of itself, but just the disconnection policy alone, I don't think it should survive at all. And I'll probably do a dance the day that Scientology implodes, to be honest, because of that. The whole disconnection process, sorry, I totally lost my train of thought there.
That's all right. That happens.
Darn, what was it? Well, I have a different question. Maybe we'll get back to it.
It was looking so good, though. It was looking so good.
Darn, what was it? My gosh, we're jumping all over the place. It's easy to lose track. So when it comes to David Miscavige, do you think the tax exemption and the religious protection that Scientology really has been its saving grace, I have to say? Like when you watch the NXIVM documentary, Keith Raniere was brought up on a RICO case. He's in jail right now serving 120 years for, to be honest, a hell of a lot less than I imagined they'd be able to get David Miscavige on. Do you think that they fall in the same category? Like, what are your thoughts on if that religious protection under, you know, with the tax exemption, if that wasn't there, what do you think would happen?
What with Scientology?
Yeah.
It would go. It would. Well, it's already started slow demise. I think that would just accelerate it. But like any zealot-based cult, it's going to fight tooth and nail to stay around as long as it can. I don't know the ins and outs of how that works with the taxes. If they did lose their tax exempt status, if they had to start paying taxes on all the properties they own based on the locations, they don't make the money to do that. So they would eventually have to start getting rid of properties. Right. To keep going. They would have to cut down on staff. They may just try to keep their big whales there and keep going. All of this is all pure conjecture. But losing the tax exempt status would be the straw that broke the camel's back, unquestionably. You know, Dave lives essentially like a billionaire at this particular point because of that. Private jets everywhere, G550, you know, John Law boots. His assistant, Val, his one-time steward, Valerie, told me that he would get lunch catered from Nobu in Malibu brought to ASI when he was working down in LA, 2 or 3 options in case he didn't like one. So we're talking about $300-400 for lunch. Yeah. Meanwhile, as Mark Henley's covered in so much detail on his channel with Claire, we were getting our meals at 25 cents a pop. Now, again, at Golden Era Productions, we had the best food of all the echelons in the Sea organization. It wasn't horrible food. It wasn't. It wasn't half as good as what you can get now because it was very limited.
But you're still making $50 a week when he's flying high on helicopters. And you made me remember my question, Sterling.
Okay, good. Go for it.
About disconnection. I'm fascinated to know, because I've watched so many people and so many videos on SPTV of people saying that, their brother blew. You know, for anybody that's watching that doesn't know what that means, it's somebody that just decides to leave without a permission from Scientology, right? They escape, if you will, Scientology. So they have family members that blew, and eventually, just based on the fact that they have a family member that's suddenly speaking out against Scientology, they feel the ramifications of that. And they've been declared just because they have family members that are now speaking out or causing a ruckus for Scientology.
Yes.
This is why I don't understand, and why I want to scream to every current standing Scientologist, David Miscavige is the ultimate suppressive person. And I don't understand how he gets away with this. Yeah. Every single family member the guy has spoken out. Even his father, everybody has left. I don't understand how. Is that understood by Scientologists?
You're the first external person to ask that question. It is something I've talked about with my family several times, and it's something that I did wonder about the very first time I saw David Miscavige show up with a boot on after he broke his ankle at Tom Cruise's birthday party. The first thought went through my mind is, God, I wonder if that guy is in trouble or doing any handling. And then I saw him riding his motorcycle with the boot on. And I was like, oh, wow, wouldn't you normally? So in the Sea organization, if you have an injury, you're immediately taken off driving any vehicles.
Oh, right. So, sorry, I'm glad you said that, because I didn't know.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha. Until you've resolved that situation, you're removed from driving any vehicles in case you'd hurt yourself. So moving forward, I mean, think about Dave Miscavige. Think about his. Well, first of all, his mom hated him, but that's not anything you can pick at. His brother, his older brother, Ron Jr.
Yes.
Leaves.
And now Ron was married to your mom.
That's right. Then, first Justin, his nephew, leaves. Then Ron Jr. and my mom leave. Then I leave, but you really can't count me because I'm not really that, then Jenna leaves. Mm-hmm. Then Ron Miscavige Sr. leaves. So all his family's left.
Speak out and write books. Out.
That's right. Yeah. Ronnie Jr. has not spoken out per se, but he's definitely put up Mike Rinder and helped out with, Tom DeVock and stuff like that, but personally didn't speak. Both him and Biddy were a landing spot for several people that left, which it's always funny to me because those two people don't mention it as much as they should. Tom DeVock and Mike Rinder both, or maybe not DeVock, but Rinder definitely lived with my parents for quite a bit when he left. And they put him up to take care of him because they've known each other from forever.
And you knew Mike's kids very well.
Yeah. And so then Dave Miscavige's sister gets arrested for drugs in Clearwater, Tampa. I think Aaron did a video on that. Nice. I mean, in any circumstances, Dave Miscavige is not even qualified to work in an HCO department anymore, let alone the department he's in. But that's the cognitive dissonance. He should not. The dude should be doing dishes in the galley based on his familial records. That's just a fact. Like, he should not be in the position he's in. He can't. In fact, he's not even allowed to be on dissemination lines. So he shouldn't be speaking at events per Scientology policy because of his family connections.
Right.
But
how
again,
do current Scientologists, how do they justify that? Or do they not even consider it?
They don't even consider it.
Do you think that those that end up feeling the raw end of the stick because they have an extended family member that has left and is speaking out, and then they're suddenly punished? Do you think that those people, likely because they're impacted by it, suddenly they're like, what the hell, man? Why am I getting... Do you think that happens in those moments, or? You would think so, but one of the first people to publicly say that was Paul Haggis. Oh, right. Right. So it wasn't directly related to Dave, but Tommy, whatever his name is,
the spokesperson for Scientology. I never met the guy.
Oh, Tommy Davis.
Tommy Davis.
Tommy Davis. Yeah.
When he said we don't practice disconnection, Paul Haggis lost it on that. That was the thing that really set him off. He was like, "What?" Like
the blatant lie.
Yeah, and it was just a complete lie. Yeah, and that's so it is. It's interesting, but I wish I could tell you what makes people stay in there and think about it, and not really take that information and process it in that way. It's a little bit of a. I think a lot of Scientologists are a little bit on a high half the time. About how important they are and their religion is, that they don't tend to look at that. And Scientology policy tends to compartmentalize information like that with it's just a bunch of bitter, defrocked apostates.
Right.
I mean, Mike Rinder was a fantastic executive in Scientology, and the next day he was out here speaking out against Scientology. Right. And they don't put those two things together. It's crazy. Yeah. Right. This is the guy that they listened to on stage and trusted, and now he's out here. And and now he's bad. Like, now he's bad.
The whole, I understand, like when you watched like the videos of Juliette Lewis being confronted about OT3 and the whole Xenu project and saying that's not true, and the basis that they'll lie about that because they believe if they tell somebody too early, now correct me if I'm wrong here, I'm just going based on what I've learned. If we tell anybody the truth, they'll get pneumonia. And they'll die or they'll get sick or something like that. Right. So they cling on to that basis for why they are giving themselves permission to lie bold-faced to somebody else's face that is not the truth if they're confronted with it. But when you have somebody like Tommy Davis that's asked in an interview, do you fair game people? And they say no. I can't justify the basis for that lie other than the fact that they know it's wrong and would be viewed poorly.
Right.
So then suddenly it begs the question of, are they very much aware of how nefarious a lot of their practices are, but they okay them or justify them to themselves just because they're making money? Or what is it?
I don't know. And a perfect example of that is if you ever saw one of Mike Rinder's last interviews outside the London, Oregon Scientology when he was a Scientologist, and he emphatically denies that Dave Miscavige beats anyone or ever hit him. It's a really interesting because the camera's so close to his face, it's right up in front of him. You can see his reaction, and knowing now a couple of years later that he absolutely was lying in that moment in time, and you watch his reaction, you can see those little nuances that you're like, oh, that's interesting. There's a blankness that goes over. There's no change in expression, even when there was an accusation of something so strong like that he just blocked it out. And he talks about it a little bit, and it was kind of interesting because how many times are you on national television or an international show bald-faced lying where you can go back at a later date and realize and watch that and have everyone else watch that and go, what were you thinking at that exact moment? I wish I could explain that. I mean, a lot of us Scientology kids, when we were growing up, had little microcosms of that where we would tell our relatives a bald-faced lie because it was the better thing to do. Like, oh, we don't do that. Oh, no, we don't, and you just make a joke of it. But it's funny because we did know we did that. But we kind of believed that was the right thing to do. What we did was the right thing to do. So we didn't have to justify it to these lower people because we were the elite of the elite. And I think a lot of it comes from that.
Yeah, there's also a bit of the fear of, this is what we were talking about initially at the start of our conversation about, the brilliance in terms of some of the rules that L. Ron Hubbard put in place to really protect the whole system is, the fear of punishment. If Mike had have said, yes, I've seen David beat somebody on that interview, I mean, he would have ended up in the RFP. He would have been probably
RPF,
really, or RPF, thank you. He would have really been abused. He might have even been declared a suppressive person and lost his family and his children well before he was prepared to make that decision on his own. It's blackmail, it's extortion. It's terrifying to think of. I wonder if everybody that is the current standing Scientologists, if they wake up every day and just lie to themselves and say, I'm in this because I choose to be, or if they
Right.
really feel at this point, because of the internet and the sharing of information and so many ex-Scientologists speaking out, if they have any semblance of understanding about what others are saying, it makes me wonder if they just choose to embrace the lie because they're scared. And in that case, leaning on that a little bit, what would you say to anybody that's currently in Scientology to give them the courage to leave?
There's varying thoughts on this from tons of people. I think making it a safe space for them is most important. Having intelligent, intellectual conversations where you break down the things, where you present different points of view that may be assimilated by someone that's in there. Yelling, screaming, being nasty, doing those things, that hardens their shell in my mind. Though it is a way to protest and it is a way to do things, so I don't disagree with it, but it's just not my approach. I think if some Scientologist is watching a show, watching Aaron, watching Reese, watching Mark and Claire, any one of the fabulous channels that we have on here, and just there's a point that just clicks for them where they see, oh, he's talking about that, and I never looked at it that way, that maybe opens that gap a little bit, opens the door a little bit for them to be able to start looking at everything from a different point of view. I think that's the most valuable thing we can do. You got to also base it a little bit on specifically to friends. Like if a lot of people that I grew up with, and there still are quite a few people that I grew up with that are still in Scientology, the Sea Org, and they see me speaking about it, but I'm doing it intelligently and
with grace
and empathy.
Yeah.
I think maybe that will also help, but that's just one of the many avenues, because some people may have a great reaction to, knocking down the door and doing those different sort of things. So again, my channel tends to go towards that direction because that's what I chose to do. But I think everyone's channel to some degree contributes. I don't think all do. Think all do. And that's okay for me to have that opinion. Aaron did a wonderful video last night with Reese where they actually discussed that. The differences between everyone's channel. At one point, I don't know if you know this, but there was rumorings going around. They wanted to organize SPTV so that there was scheduled things and people went on a certain time and content was a certain way.
Oh, right.
And, bless his
heart. Who would manage that?
Right? No, bless his heart. Aaron said, no way. No. And I agree, man. Had it been that, I wouldn't be here. I am not joining another cult. And SPTV will become a cult if it's regulated.
It would be. Well, we kind of saw, and not to segue into that conversation, but we kind of saw the ramifications of just resorting to type, meaning the standard mode of operation that most Scientologists have with the whole Aftermath Foundation kerfuffle.
Exactly.
A little bit. So I think it would naturally kind of manifest itself into resorting to type, because habits are hard to break, man. I still have habits that, and I might not want them, but they're going to be there and they'll be there tomorrow. It takes work to break these habits, especially when you've been in such a high controlled cult for such a long time.
And I've seen, and and I agree, and I've seen it, this is my personal opinion on it, but Jenna, my sister, never really got to a high position when she was in Scientology at Sea Org. Neither did Justin, neither did I. We were sometimes located at the top base, sometimes not. But I do notice this common thread of people that were in higher positions, that as they leave, their egos are pretty giant. Now, most of my friends and people tell you that my ego is pretty giant too. And that may be the case, mostly related to sports. But I do see in some of the videos and content that sort of like I was there, and the tendency to want to say that you were so big in Scientology, which, fact of the matter, no one out here really gives a shit how good you were in Scientology. They'd much rather hear about how well you're doing out here. And that may offend some people, and I'm sorry if it did, but hey, I was a pool boy and I was a trees IC when I was there. My only deputies were peacocks and cloisters. So, I didn't have a giant ego when it came to that. But I've had some talks personally behind the scenes where I'm saying, guys, calm down a little bit. Don't be so arrogant. People want to relate to people, not ex-Scientology executives. Anyways, I kind of want to end it on that little piece, because I think we were going to do a couple questions if we have any.
Go for it. Absolutely. Actually, I have two really quick questions for you.
You're running the thing, so tell me to shut up.
No, I have really two quick questions, and then we can move into the questions of the viewers. How do Scientologists feel about voting? Do they vote?
No. I can't speak for every Scientologist on that specifically, but I do know in the C organization, even though you're not supposed to suggest who to vote for, we got a little cheat sheet back in the day.
Right. Those politicians that support Scientology, probably.
Or politicians that aren't pro psychiatry.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then my last question is, how does Scientology feel about gender equality? Like, I know they call women sirs as well as men. I wouldn't particularly like to be called a sir, but
so it's interesting. And I'm only going to say something briefly because I don't have enough experience with that. But Janice Gillum Grady spoke about it once, which was fascinating. It's a lot of executives in Scientology are women.
Right. Okay.
And I want to say, except for when it came to security guards, gender was not a factor in how high up you got or how, now, mind you, I'm saying that right now, and I listed the people on the OSA side, with Marty Rathman, Mike Rinder, and Mike Sutter, and those guys, they were all men. And then I listed Amy Scobie, Janet Gillum Grady, and my mom on the other side, and they were all ladies. And that was, I think that was particular to those fields. But there's a lot of unbelievably fabulous managers in Scientology that were women, for sure. And that's
great.
Yeah. I think on the other side with the OSA legal, I think because they were more extroverted, outward facing, that they were more men in that case. But in Scientology or the C organization in general, I don't remember gender being a factor.
Right.
At all in decisions on who was going to go onto what position. In fact, I did work on several when I was in a somewhat high, not a high position, but whatever. I worked on several organizing boards where we would post people. And I remember staying up all night, taking names and moving them around. Not once was it ever, Anna, she's a girl, she can't do that, ever.
Gotcha.
So that just wasn't a factor.
Well, that's right. And I did notice that, a lot of the non-Scientologist lawyers that are hired to represent Scientology, oftentimes, they seem to be weighted more on the female side.
But
so
what's interesting,
yeah, it is interesting. I kind of I wanted to ask your thoughts on it anyways, but I kind of, based on that, knowing that the Scientologist or non-Scientologist lawyers that are hired being predominantly female, I did think, I can't imagine David Miscavige, who's clearly the ultimate narcissist, if he had gender issues. I can't imagine that he would hire.
He did in one way. He did in one way, and that you were bringing me to that. He was vicious towards women.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. He was vicious towards Amy Scobie. He was nasty towards, and I'm not going to be able to remember all the names, but he made derogatory comments about women on the regular basis.
Sterling, he did not.
Yeah, absolutely. If you guys want the best example of it, it's in Amy Scobie's book. The names he called Amy, what he said to Amy Scobie is so bad that he should be canceled just because of that, if anything else. He tried to do it to my mom once. That's when she walked away. She said, I'm not doing this. I'm not, you can't talk to me like that. No, he picks on everyone. I would say almost evenly picks on everyone, but he gets vicious, very vicious when he talks to women that he does not like. That
really ticks me right off. I mean, I'm ticked off at David Miscavige for a lot of reasons, but you're right. How is he not canceled yet?
Yeah, no. I mean, the stuff he said to Amy Scobie was horrific. Really, really bad. Guys, if you haven't read Amy Scobie's book, it's another wonderful book. Read it. If you want an insight into David Miscavige's mind and how crude and crass he can be, that's a perfect book for you too. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, well, that's all my questions, Sterling. If you want to jump right into the comments, go for it.
I do. Well, I'm going to see, I see one starred one here. It's probably Blake. No, it's not. It's here, let's pop it up. Free Xenu Project of Farsec. Thank you so much for the super chat. Sterling, does the Curious Cat have a channel? Yes, she does. And someone actually put it into the chat. And whoever that was, I love you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
That was amazing. She does. Guys, hop in there. You can go look at it. Let's see. I'm just going to bounce through a few here, see if we have anything that's interesting. First of all, hi to everyone that tuned into us on a Sunday morning. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Christa, we've got people from the UK. We've got people from Australia. We've got people everywhere in here.
Lovely. And, well, to everybody in the UK, hello. Yeah, right? I'm also in the UK. I'm a Canadian living in the UK. So.
No, that's awesome. And one thing, guys, I saw as I was talking, that several people suggested either books and or movies or films, documentaries. So I'm going to ask you two things. One, please hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't already. It helps with the algorithm. If you've not subscribed to That Curious Cat yet, please also go and do that. We're going to be doing some more interviews. I think we maybe got through 2 questions essentially.
So good. I sent Sterling a list. Well, we talked about a list, and there was at least 60, wasn't there?
Yeah,
It's
there
a
was
real
at least, and they're all intelligent. They all can take up an entire live themselves. Also, please, if you have a chance, when this video is done, go to the comments section on the actual video and put in that same information. That way I can actually get to it. I'm not able to keep the live chat all the time. It sometimes disappears. I don't know why. I'll have to ask Aaron that, but I'm asking for that. If you could do that, that'd be awesome. Thank you so much. All right, let's see what else we have here. And a lot of these are just people commenting. So if we don't have questions, that's totally okay. Cause I have 8 minutes until I have a brunch. So.
Oh, look at you. There was a comment that I saw, and now it's gone. I can't seem to star, Sterling. So this is.
You can't. We have to give you access for that.
Yeah, that's okay. Next time.
Yeah.
And there's so many comments here. Thanks for commenting, everybody. I will go through everything. So I will read through. And if there was any questions that we missed.
Okay. Well, I saw one here, and this is a person I know. Kay's in the house. Ghost Store. Thank you, Kay. This is a lady that I worked with a long time ago who reached out.
Oh, wow.
And she's a fantastic person. The Johannesburg was brutal, but the individualized questions could be much worse. And she's alluding to what I was mentioning about that.
Gotcha.
The individualized questions were nasty because realize the person writing it could either be the person doing the interrogation or someone that really doesn't like you.
Right.
And it's almost like free reign for them. They could write. There was no approval for what the questions were. They could just write them.
Wow.
Yeah. So
well, that could just get out of control really quick.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right. What else do we have here? Okay. Oh, Blue Dragon. Blue Dragon, can you please list Sterling's email again? Thank you. Yes, I'll put that up for you right now. How about that? Here we go. That is my YouTube address, guys. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I agree with you. Justine Carter, I understand the initial draw in, but after that, when they find out what things are really about, why stay? I don't get it. I agree.
I don't get it either. I mean, I kind of can get it just based on what we talked about before, the financial investment.
Right.
You know, the plus there's also the fear of losing your friends and family that you kind of lured in. So there are a lot of systems in place that could possibly keep you in. But I think maybe that's why you see a lot of ex-Scientologists like 20, 25 years down the road. That's how long it takes to work up, to really open your eyes that there's got to be something better maybe. I don't know. I'm speculating here because I wasn't in Scientology, but.
No, I agree. You do get locked in because it's like an investment. You're holding, you're keeping your money there until the stock price goes up, essentially.
Yeah.
You're hoping, okay, it's going to recover. It's going to recover because I put all this money in already, and I don't want to lose everything.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of that among other things.
It's the carrot too, right?
Yeah.
Like you're waiting for, not everybody even reaches the bridge. So you're trying to get to the bridge because you want to be, I mean, what do they call it? I can't think of the language now. We've been talking so long. But when you get to the end of if you're an OT8, what are they called?
The OT8s. It's the bridge to total freedom. So you're talking about the
freedom, the bridge to total freedom. Like that's the ultimate carrot. It's right. Like you just, so even with, I can understand listening to Leah Remini's interview, when she said she was at OT3 and heard about Xenu. Yeah. And was like under her breath whispering to her mom, like, are you kidding me? Like, I totally can get why she'd do that. But yet I also understand why she'd keep going, because you'd have to wonder, there has to be more than this.
Yeah, right.
There has to be more. So it's just the unknown, the allure of the unknown. So it's just a fascinating psychology case. Really.
It really is. It really
I
is.
wonder if universities are discussing Scientology in
I think
psychology.
I think they are.
Yeah, that I'd be interested in reading some like dissertations on psychology as it relates to Scientology.
It'd be fascinating.
It really would, yeah.
And that means anyone in the chat, if you guys know of something like that, a recorded lecture, anything, it would be awesome to dissect that. Atkins in Texas. This girl Atkins in Texas is kind of brilliant to me. She has so much good insight. She's almost always watching my lives, and whatever she says, if I delve into it or look into it, always seems to be something precious. So I love to pull up her comments. Again, I'm also recommending The Sociopath Next Door. It explores the nature-nurture question. She says 1 in 25 people are sociopaths. A small percentage of them are criminals.
Wow. That's, you know what, Atkins in Texas, that's fascinating. I'm not familiar with The Sociopath Next Door. Is that a book?
You're not, I have heard of that.
Is that a book?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you for that recommend. I'll look that up.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Guys, I think that's it. I got to run to a brunch. Christa, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being a trooper with all my questions. I've got a ton more, so you just let me know when you're ready.
Absolutely. Let's try. I mean, obviously Christmas is coming up next week.
Yes, yeah.
But in 2024, let's hit it hard and do that. I love it.
And thanks to everybody who's watching.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone who's watching. I so appreciate it. I hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday or Monday, and we will catch you guys later. Oh, I got a different outro here. Here we go, guys. The outro I am going to use is for That Curious Cat. So here we go.
Thank you. Bye, folks.